Joe, welcome.
Well, welcome, Paulina. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I'm really excited about this interview because when we met before, I told you that I'm originally from Bulgaria. And a few days ago, I told my dad that I was interviewing you. And he was like, oh my God, well, you got to tell him that when we first moved to the US in the year 2000, he
Yeah,
told me, I didn't know this story, but he told me that the first shoe that he ever bought was New Balance because it said made in USA. And he was like,
yeah.
I was so proud to have it, to have my shoes say made in USA. And I was like, oh, I really didn't know that you guys had this line and all this stuff. So I learned a bunch, but do you hear stories like that often?
Yes, absolutely. People hear that we make, some of our shoes here in the U.S. and take a great sense of pride in it, and want to support any Made in USA initiative. And yeah, so I do hear that.
I feel like there's a lot of immigrant dads that I'm sure particularly love it.
Yeah. Well, I'm first generation myself, actually. My
Oh,
parents
really?
came over here in 1959 from Ireland with my sister and $100, and
That's really
stayed
cool.
with one of their cousins, my mother's cousin, for a little bit to kind of get them on their feet. And so, yeah, I appreciate the immigration that people come here and try to make a better place for their
Yeah.
families, for their future. So,
I know. I was trying to explain to my husband how much immigrants like take pride in their clothes and their shoes being made
yeah.
in America. So I thought that was really interesting. But you've talked a lot about how New Balance, like one of the cornerstone values, is that you guys do a lot. I don't know what percentage now of domestic manufacturing. How does that work?
Well, we have 6 factories here in the U.S. It is a small portion of our overall global volume. I mean, we're a six and a
Like,
half billion dollar company, but
mhm.
we're the only ones that have athletic manufacturing facilities here in the U.S., and we've had them for years. Here in the Northeast, New Hampshire, Maine used to have literally hundreds of shoe factories that slowly and surely, by the mid 80s, basically closed and all went over to Asia. And Jim Davis, our owner, Jim and Ann Davis, did not want to do that. So
Mm.
we've been in Maine, in Skowhegan, Maine, since 1979. We've been in Norwich Walk, the next town over, since 1978. We've been here in Lawrence since 1979. So in those communities for that long, and it's twofold. One, we believe we're a better brand as a result of it, because we
Mhm.
design, we develop the product, we make all of the processes. So we believe our quality is stronger. It makes us a better partner for our contract manufacturers overseas. And then you're in these communities and you see the difference that it can make within those communities. And that's
Yeah.
a really important part of it. And it's not just making the shoes, it's the impact that in those communities.
That's really cool. So you're CEO now, but you started with New Balance in 1995. Can you tell me a little bit about your own journey and what role did you start in and how did you make your way to CEO?
I don't remember. It was just so long ago, actually, now. But no, I joined in 1995 as senior product manager for running and classics and
Hmm.
custom. Those were the 3 categories.
What is
And
that? What do those mean?
custom where would be special makeups that you would be doing for key customers around the country. Uh, and then a friend of mine was the head of cross training, and another person headed up walking and kids. Those were the 3
Mhm.
businesses that we had. The company at the time was 150 million when I joined,
Wow.
predominantly in the US, with a little bit of business in Japan. And so it was a much smaller company. I'd come from at the time, a $1.2 billion company, and I was joining an entrepreneur, which a public
A
company.
startup? No.
Well, coming from a public company that was initially a spun off of Union Carbide, big company,
Mm.
conglomerate, and all of that, suit every day, to coming over to New Balance is 125, 150 million. I remember my boss saying to me the first day, I got you a laptop. And and I thought to myself, my goodness, you mean I might not have gotten a computer. So entrepreneurial it was at that time. But yeah, the company went on a growth trajectory for the next 6 or 7 years. We grew to over $1 billion. It was predominantly in the U.S. And it was the shoes that we refer to now as dad shoes. Back then, they were worn by these college kids, cross training and trail were the two ones that really got the brand younger overnight. And it's funny because, the same people that bought those cross trainers in college and now dads and grandfathers, and they're still wearing them. So it's funny to see that, it come back. But yeah, I did that, and we bought a brand. It was the first acquisition for the company. It was a brown shoe and boot brand called Dunham, and I went over to manage that, and it gave me great experience as a general manager. And so I had oversight over that for a couple of years, and then came back over into New Balance in 2002 to manage Asia Pacific, and then in 2005 assumed responsibility for all of our international business. And I did that to 2009. And then I moved back in to run our global product and development and marketing. And I did that for about 7 years or so. And then I moved into a role as leading the commercial business around the globe, and then subsequently into this role.
Did you always aspire to be CEO one day, or was that not really on your radar?
I don't really think I thought about it when I was in college or anything like that. I do remember when I worked at my previous job and I got into brand management, and it gave me the opportunity to really run a segment of the business. It gave me P&L responsibility and the ability to shape the product and the marketing and the margins and all of that stuff. And from there, I really put the hooks in me on general management, and I really have always enjoyed that element of it. But when I took the job here, no, I wasn't thinking I was going to be CEO. I was coming into an athletic company. I was moving into the athletic industry, an area that always excited me and still does, because of the element of performance and lifestyle and how they intersect and everything like that. So. Yeah.
And you didn't have to wear a suit to work every day.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. That was a plus. And not wearing shoes, that was even
there
better.
You go. Yeah. That's hilarious. So you became CEO in 2018, and then 2 years later, the entire world shut down. There was a global pandemic. And I've interviewed a few CEOs for the profile, and it's interesting to see how they navigated and weathered that period of uncertainty. I'm curious how you did that with such a global team, and what lessons in crisis leadership did you learn from that?
Yeah. So I became CEO in late 2018.
Okay.
Last month, basically, last 2 months of the year. So we came into 2019 and our business was just not strong. Our profitability was low, and we really spent the year trying to pivot to leaning into the customer, the consumer. So we basically declared that the global independent, we'd done all this research on the target consumer, and it was this young consumer. It was true all around the globe, 18 to 34-year-old. And we just quieted the noise in the organization on who the muse was and who we were targeting. That was something that we did. The second thing we did was to redirect capital towards our tech stack, specifically for our online business. We signed Kawhi Leonard in 2019, and he wins the NBA championship. Great. Our website shuts down the next day from the traffic, could not handle it. So we were in the midst of this investment, thankfully. So that happened in April, and by back to school, and certainly by holiday, our site speed was really stronger. We could handle Black Friday or any of the volume that was coming in. So that was 2019. And then, so I had a year under my belt when COVID hit in February of 2020. But, they say nothing can prepare you for it. I do think the fact that I ran our international business, big business for us, it's 2/3 of our business. And so, communication, obviously important from that standpoint. Making sure you're bringing groups together And we started a meeting on Tuesday mornings at 7:30 in March of 2020 with our regional leaders from all around the globe
Mhm.
and our central function leaders, marketing, product, HR, legal, finance, DTC. We still have that meeting today. And I
Wow.
fundamentally believe that that really helped us to become a global company. We always said business all around the world, but we were like an American company doing business abroad as opposed to being a global brand. So we dialed in on the consumer. We had our tech stack ready when all our stores
Mhm.
closed, and the only
Mhm.
tech business was online. And then, just as important, we had our team aligned, and we began a series of projects that we had small teams on it, and we gave everybody on those teams the authority, the accountability, and the autonomy to come back with action plans, not white papers, action plans, because everything
Big
was
difference.
big difference. Yes. And I use that terminology all the time because I fundamentally believe it's there is a big difference. And so we were able to accomplish so much during that time period. And I think it's a big reason that we have come out of COVID maybe stronger than anyone in our industry.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like that kind of preparation is really key. And I wanted to ask you off of that. I talked to a lot of founders who started their companies when things were good, and now they're running into the uncertainty and craziness of the world and the markets. But how do you think that there are skills that, let's say, young leaders should develop in order to properly be able to transition from peacetime CEO to wartime CEO when that's required?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I mentioned communication. It's so important in peacetime or wartime. And, I do think one of the silver linings of the past 4 years is that the technology was there. We weren't using Zoom back then. We
Right.
weren't using these things that allow you to continue that allows you to communicate at a much higher level. So it can augment the in-person. And we just held our town hall last week, and we had watch events in like 15 locations all around the globe, as well as having 700 people in our facility across the street. And 4 years ago, we just couldn't do it. Could
Yeah.
not do that. So I do think that communication is an important part of it. When you turn into a crisis situation, you got to narrow the agenda, make sure that you are focused on the areas that are meaningful, and then put together small teams that can get after it and make sure the timelines are tight so that you get things done.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I feel like the pandemic kind of forced that innovation to happen quicker, but
Yeah,
maybe we should have all been using the tools like Zoom before.
we should have.
Uh, how I can't remember, but you told me before, are you guys completely remote now? Are people coming back to the office? What is your stance on that?
uh, we in the US, we Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, people are in the office, and that's
Uh-huh.
when we're requiring people to come into the office. So as we transition back from being remote to a hybrid, we started off with Wednesday being the anchor day, and then
Mhm.
Tuesday and Thursday, people had to be ready if there was an in-person meeting. And everybody was coming in on Wednesday. And the reason why we went to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, rather than, pick 3 days, whatever you want, we wanted people to be together because we wanted people to be together. And,
Yeah.
just coming in random days, they could be in the office going, why am I here if, the other team's not here? And so we know people were working hard during the pandemic. Our results demonstrate it, but we also know that being in person helps teamwork. There's no question about it. You get to know people at a different level, and we think
Mhm.
teamwork is a secret sauce that we have.
Yeah, it's hard to recreate solely online. Um, so as the CEO of New Balance, you're competing with other footwear giants like Nike, Adidas, etc. How do you innovate constantly in an industry that requires constant innovation? How do you keep up with that pace?
Well, I think you look across your industry to make sure that you are keeping pace, staying ahead with whatever's happening within your industry. And then you make sure that you're looking outside of your industry to
Mm.
see what else is happening that can help you to develop new innovative ways of doing things. Now, obviously, there's the physical product, the footwear and the apparel that we produce. There's also now, more than ever, there's the digital products and those type of things. And definitely from outside the industry, you can see things. The benchmarks are higher, meaning for delivery, delivery from our .com, I don't look to the industry. I look at Amazon, for example, and they're the benchmark, as for all of us know, on how quickly and that you're getting product to them, as an example.
Yeah. Do you have other examples where you've drawn inspiration from outside of the industry and like implemented it internally?
I think our designers can give you a better answer for that because quite frankly, some they draw their inspiration differently. Some of them find inspiration from the fashion segment. Some of them find inspiration from the automobile sector, and not just what's happening now, but drawing upon what happened a number of years ago with the design lines and things like that. But certainly when it comes to speed and trying to make product faster, that can come from a number of different areas.
Yeah. And I'm curious, as I was kind of drafting my questions, what do brainstorming meetings at New Balance look like? Are you part of any of those?
I ran our product engine for 8
Right.
years, so those are some of the if I look back, some of the most exciting times where, and they can be different. They can be as simple as a walking meeting when you have a couple, three people that are walking. And, I do find walking meetings sometimes can draw you out rather than just sitting across from a table and trying to think of the next big idea. But, our product teams, for example, would go on trips. And they would go out together and they would make sure they're seeing, they could be going into museums, they could be going into parks, they could be going on campuses, they could be going into going to a racetrack, things like that, to try to draw inspiration for what's coming back. And they would come back and they would put these elements together. And I found when they would come in and create this work that you would be going through to be really inspirational.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I was reading that you guys have this massive $300 million multi-sport research lab called the Track in Boston. What happens inside?
Well, our headquarters here on our
Yes.
street is the Boston Bruins practice facility, which is owned by New Balance Development, which is an arm of New Balance. We have the Celtics practice facility. And then we also have the track at New Balance, which again was, so all of those were big construction projects. And so you got a track, you got the Celtics, you got the Bruins, you got our headquarters. This is really the hub of sports within Boston. So, if you want to see the Bruins and what's happening there, you just walk next door and saw it. The track is brand new. It opened up a year ago, April of 22. So it'll be 2 years this coming April.
Yeah.
And it's in its second indoor season. And it's one of the fastest tracks in the world. There was just an event there on Saturday. Next month, in March, it'll host the Division I track and field championship. So that'll be a very exciting moment for it. The rest of the year, there are community events in there, or there are programs for indoor soccer or basketball and cheering and things like that. So there's and it's from all levels. So we had world-class athletes there this past weekend. We'll have the best in the country win the Division I championships. And then the rest of the year, when the track season is not there, there will be other events from kids of all ages. Within that facility, there's a music venue. So it really made this whole street area younger. That's where we held our town hall the other day, because you can fit 700 people in there and do that. And then we also built a state-of-the-art innovation center in there.
That's what I want to talk about. Yeah. Well, what
Yes,
is that?
it's super cool, is what it is. But it's where all of our product that we bring in to test, develop new compounds for midsole, new spike plates for athletes. We have the athletes that we sponsor, Olympians and such, that come in, or athletes, our basketball athletes or soccer athletes, they can come in and they can test out the footwear that they're using. We have force plates within there, which are put into the ground so it can tell how your foot is impacting at various speeds or coming around corners or on the basketball court. We literally have it set up that it can accommodate baseball, soccer, basketball, basically any sport in addition to running. And then there's chambers in there that help us also test apparel. So you can put apparel on someone, they can be in there, and you can bring up the humidity in the room to see how the garments are reacting to the humidity in the skin, how that is affecting the material itself. You can bring the altitude up as well for an athlete to experience, what it's like to run at 2 miles as opposed to being at ground level, if you will. So it really is just an inspiring place that we think will create the future for us.
Yeah. And what do you do with all that research and data?
Try to develop the best product in the world. That's ultimately ultimately what we're doing.
Yeah, because let's say an athlete comes in, can they come in with a different type of shoe, not New Balance, to test it?
Well, I mean, we're looking at what other people are doing. There's no question.
Yeah.
But if we have an athlete that is training for the Olympics and the spike plate matters because of the way their foot lands, so they can come in, they can run, we can see how they're impacting, and we can develop the spike plate through 3D printing and ultimately a mold that'll allow us to develop. We do that for football players, meaning soccer players, baseball players. So yeah, it depends. It depends on the sport, really.
That's really cool. I was looking at some photos of that of the track inside, and it looks beautiful. So I wanted to ask you. You mentioned this earlier, but when we had our daughter, my husband's brothers got him, like, as a gift, like a white pair of New Balances, because he became a dad. So my question is, like, New Balance does have this kind of reputation of being a dad shoe in some circles, but is that something that you embrace, or is that a brand storyline that you kind of wish to rewrite?
You would ask me that 15 years ago, we probably would have been a little bit defensive or say, no. Today, I mean, the positioning of the brand, the sports that we're in, 20% of major league players wear our product. We've world-class Olympians that are getting ready to win medals in Paris this year. We have brand ambassadors from music and entertainment that are
There's high fashion too.
Yeah, absolutely. We have fashion brands that want to align with us and work with us, and we've created some of the best collabs in the industry over the last few years. So we embrace it. I mean, we began running ads like maybe 3 years ago on our 990, which was the industry's first $100 running shoe that, worn by dads in Ohio and by models in Paris. And we ran that ad, and it was just a great expression of the way we feel about it. I mean, we ran ads on Father's Day on, promoting it, and obviously it's catching on a little bit there. So I think it's, first of all, I think it's funny. I think it's great. And, we're a brand with heritage, and we don't want to run away from that. And at the same time, the stuff we're producing today is fashionable, it's high performance, and it's coveted by so many around the globe. So we're in a good space.
I was trying to figure it out, because as I was doing my research, I saw an article in a fashion magazine that was like, 5 dad shoes you need to be wearing this season. And I'm like, but you're telling young girls to be wearing the dad shoe, not dads wearing the dad. It's so complicated and interesting.
Yeah, I know. It's great, actually.
um, so as CEO, how I'm curious, how do you spend your day? Like what does your day look like on an average day?
Now, it depends on the day. I'm not sure if there's an average day, but it really does depend on the day.
Do
And
you bucket your time differently or
I try to make sure that I have time set aside, that I'm just not all meetinged out,
yeah.
because during COVID, it was just nonstop like that. I think it was true for many. But I'm trying to make sure that I have that space that allows me to make sure I'm planning, connecting the dots, and not just going from meeting to meeting. In addition, we're a global company with 2/3 of our business, again, outside of the US. So Asia's 12, 14 hours ahead, 16 hours in Australia this time of year. So there are calls at night, there are calls in the morning that that are just different if we were just a US based company with business here. So that's why I'm saying not every day is no typical day, but I try to make sure that when I'm at my best, I
Yeah.
want to make sure that I'm getting exercise and those type of things. And I've ebbed and flowed. I just can't do it routinely in the morning. I know some people do it. Some days I do it in the morning. Some days I do it in the evening.
Hmm.
And it probably depends on the time of year too. But and then I travel. So
And that's spent. So that's going off of that. It's like what Paul Graham says about the maker schedule versus the manager schedule.
yeah,
And the manager schedule is you have meeting after meeting, and your calendar is almost like other people have control of it, whereas a maker has time for creative problem solving. How do you block that time out, and what do you do in that period of time for like that you reserve for deep thinking, or do you do that when you're exercising?
well, deep thinking, I'm probably better off not sitting behind this desk. I find far better if when you get away. I'm a big believer in recovery. I think
Hmm.
there's a point of diminishing returns if you're continuing to just grind it, grind it, grind it, and at some point you got to make sure that you are being purposeful about your recovery. And to me, those are three simple elements: purposeful about your sleep, purposeful about your nutrition, and then purposeful about your exercise. And if I am purposeful about those things, and then being true to my purpose on why I am actually doing all of this and why I want to do it, which for me is about trying to help people be their personal best here, and to help my family to make sure that I am healthy for my family. That's why I want to make sure I have that recovery. But it also helps me to be more present, more engaged, more patient. And when I have those things, I'm more creative. I can connect the dots easier. That's where
Yeah.
I'm at next.
Isn't it so funny? I find this great where it's like the basics. If you can master sleep, exercise, and nutrition, everything else in your life kind of falls into place. But most people don't even have those foundational things down, which
Maslow
I am one of them.
hierarchical of needs. Really, it's that
Exactly.
simple.
And you mentioned your family. I just want to ask you really quickly. I interviewed the former CEO of General Electric, Jeff Immelt, and in it, we were talking about some of the things that went wrong at GE during his tenure. And he was like, yeah, I mean, it was crazy to feel like millions of people hated you at work, but then you came home and it was totally different. He was like, my family doesn't care. Like it's a
Yeah.
totally normal situation. How do I'm just so curious as a top leader of a huge global company, how does your family react? And do you kind of talk to them about work? How does it work?
When I'm at home with my family, I'm I'm not the CEO. I'm barely the CEO of the house. Where my kids are older now, so actually they can appreciate a little bit more. And a lot of times when you don't think your kids are listening to you, they may not be at that particular moment, but they're hearing you, and then they can apply it later on. But But I'm a father at home. I have 3 children. My wife has 2. We're like the modern day Brady Bunch.
Yeah,
We do things together. I'm so grateful that they get along. We plan trips every year and do things together. And yeah, I'm a dad, is what I am.
that's awesome. That's great. Um, and then last year, I read that you said your plan for New Balance was to double in size and become a $10 billion business within a few years. What year would you like to hit that $10 billion goal? And why is that 10 billion such an important number?
Well, it was to make sure that our ambition was big, and we laid out that number. Ended 20 we ended 2019 at 4.4 billion, and then, excuse me, 4 billion. And then when the pandemic hit, we were 3.3 billion. But by the end of that year, our e-commerce business was really strong. The brand marketing continued to get better and is really strong today. And that allowed us to put together a plan. We said, we're going to develop some plans to get us to 7 billion, but actually our plan is to get to 10. We didn't put out a date for the 10. We did put out a date for the 7 billion. And we said by 2026 is where we wanted to get there from. And we've, outpaced that. We're hopeful to get to 7 billion in 2024. And then during this year, we'll lay out the plan specifically to get to 10. And then we'll pick a bigger number beyond that as to what our aspiration is. And so it was about that, making sure that our ambition was big, but also with specific action plans to get us to get it to that $7 billion number. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah. So I recently interviewed, he's a private equity investor, Graham Weaver, and he said that there's a lot of power in setting measurable quantitative goals versus just saying, we want to be a big business. We want to be a $10 billion business. Do you believe that there's power to putting a number on your ambitions?
Yes, we did. I do. I think that if you put a number out, you got to be able to articulate a path to get there and where the focus areas need to be so the company can align against them. But we did that, and we will continue to do that. But I also think it's helpful to say, that's our path. And if we get to that number and our momentum, and if we're doing the things the right way, then really our path is not just that number. It's far beyond that number. And so that also gives people a line of sight beyond that short-term goal to go, wow, it could be even bigger.
Yeah, but isn't it dangerous if you fall short and then people were relying on you for getting there?
Always. But that comes with any leadership role that, there's going to be things that get thrown in your way. Listen, we in 2019, we had laid out a plan and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And, at that point, it was about survival and making sure that everybody in the organization knew that we were with them. And,
yeah,
so it just shifts. At that point, it was just different than numbers. That's for sure.
Yeah. And did you say a year you hope to meet that goal?
7, 10?
10.
No, we hope to reach 7 this year, which would be 2 years earlier than our original plan. And we're in the process of the next few months, and then we're going to determine what that date for 10 will be.
Got it. Okay. You let me know. I'll hold you accountable.
I will, yeah.
So under your leadership, New Balance has made a number of forays in pro baseball, basketball, tennis, by partnering with celebrities and athletes and other brand ambassadors. How do you think about athlete endorsements, and how do you measure success in that type of thing?
Well, I think whether it's athletes or any type of brand ambassadors, we try to make sure that they have the same values that we have. And
how do you screen for that?
Well, I mean, I think you try to screen for it. You try to talk to them, particularly some of the, some of the younger athletes that we have brought on. I mean, Coco Gauff has been with us when she was like 15 years old.
That's awesome.
And you can see by talking to the person, meet their parents. He has wonderful parents, and the same is true for some of the global football players that we've signed. So
Yeah.
I think that's a piece of it. And there's no question they've helped us. I think our brand team and sports marketing team have done such a good job of identifying these game-changing athletes, potentially game-changing athletes. So
Yeah.
it's really not our strategy to try to have a roster of just to have the most. What you want to have is really the tip of the spear, or ones that have the potential to do that, and stick with them and stay with them. And if they're, and then use them in your creative. All of our average
Yeah.
key our key brand ambassadors and athletes, we're using them in our creative. So you take great creative and then you take them and you put it together, and that's how you create energy.
What's been one of the most successful campaigns that you've run with athletes?
The one that we've been running the past 2 or 3 years now, We Got Now, has been really strong. And what the team has done is, if you were to turn on a baseball game, you
Mm-hmm.
would see our top baseball players within creative within that. And if you watch the US Open, then you can see Coco Gauff in our creative, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we entered into the NFL, we got back on NFL on Sundays. From a advertising standpoint, we began to use all of them in it. And
Mm-hmm.
so what's great about today than 10 or 15 years before, 10 or 15 years ago, is that there are so many metrics to manage, to understand whether or not you are being effective or not. And then you can manage your assets accordingly. And that,
I
to
feel
me,
like
is a game changer.
I feel like the site crashing because so many people are trying to buy is probably a good metric.
Oh yeah, that's not one you want to get famous for, but
Yeah. Are there any other sports you're looking to expand into?
American football.
Mm.
Yeah. And we've just announced the signing of Marvin Harrison Jr. He's the wide receiver from Ohio State that's projected to be top 5 in the draft. And so we have
Mm.
football boots that are slated to come out this year, and we're really excited about it.
That's awesome. And looking into 2024 and beyond, what are some areas of innovation you hope to invest a lot of time and money in?
Certainly running.
Hmm.
We if you look at our running product and we have 2 platforms. One is Fresh Foam, the other one's Fuel Cell. And the teams have been diligent in making sure that those shoes are completely dialed in from a compound standpoint, meaning the midsoles. And then we have a lot of athletes that are getting ready to compete in the trials, whether they're the US trials or the UK trials, and then ultimately the Olympics. And our R&D teams are working with them feverishly to make sure that they are prepared.
I'm kind of curious, do athletes ever make product recommendations to like your R&D team?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, no question. And uh, when they're talking about what they're wearing, that you want their feedback. What are they feeling?
Yeah.
But it's not just anecdotal. You can
Yeah.
bring it into the lab. You can say,
Mm.
here's what the data is showing us, the way you're landing, the way you're turning, at different speeds and that sort of thing. And that can help fine tune, their ideas. Or it could say, I know you're feeling that, but it's actually this. All we're trying to do is solve, not try to say we created it or they created it. A lot of it is co-creation at that level.
Right. Wow. That's
I
cool.
think that's why the athletes like working with us, because they get that ability for input.
Are there any startups or any companies in the footwear space that you think are doing interesting work right now?
I think within footwear and apparel, there's always new entries that come in, and there's a number of that have come in the last 10 years that I think have been impressive. I think they've done a nice job. I think Hoka has done a nice job coming in
Mm.
on the footwear side of it. The apparel is more.
Yeah.
Barriers to entry are a little bit less than they are on the footwear side of it, because you don't need to buy molds and everything like that to develop apparel ranges. I think the materials that are now being used in whether it's athletic wear or how some of those materials have transcended and now into pants that men are wearing every day that used to just be all cotton, and the
Yeah.
combination of these performance materials, and to see them coming into that is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's like everything's about performance now.
And comfort. Yeah.
um, and have you made any interesting acquisitions lately?
No, no, we
No.
haven't. We own the Warrior brand, which
Hmm.
is one of the leaders in hockey and lacrosse. We've owned that for a number of years, but with the growth that we're experiencing, and obviously we get people coming to us all the time that
Yeah.
when they're looking to divest something, but we just feel right now we have so much opportunity with our brand that we're trying to focus and make sure we're taking advantage of it.
And my second to last question is something I ask everybody. How do you define the word success?
Well, I think that there's a number of ways to describe it. Obviously, from a business perspective, if you are achieving what you're setting out to do, but ultimately, if you want success on your business and on your personal life, I think that's what everybody strives for. And so I think they have to be. I think there's equal weight there.
Hmm.
No,
Yeah.
and actually, I think there's more weight on your personal side of it. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, I was reading some of the things that you have posted on your LinkedIn, and I was surprised by how much of it was actually around, like you said, recovery, but also mental health.
Yeah.
Because, performance isn't just performance on the track, it's also performance in your personal life, and mental health is a big part of that. How do you guys foster that with your employee base, with the people who work at New Balance?
Well, I think during the pandemic, as much of the communication was not just about the survival of the company, it was about all of us and how
Hmm.
everybody was going through it, going through the pandemic, and how many struggles there were. So that sort of thing. So that began a series of discussions. We'd have people on, experts, and I would talk to them, and they would share their work with our teams, and the number of people tuning in for it were more than people tuning in for a business update.
Wow.
It does tell you something on how important. And the reality of it is, if your family is big enough and close enough, someone's struggling. So this is something that all families deal with. My father has Alzheimer's, so when I see him and visit him, and
Yeah.
it's and it happens at all ages and all levels. So it's something that we all have in common. My wife's ex-husband passed away from it, and
Wow.
so the experiences that I've seen people have and endure is significant. And I think it's something that we should be talking about. It 15 years ago, you'd never talk about it. Today,
Right.
and I think it's healthy.
That's great. Yeah. It's like not only is the world very uncertain, everybody has something going on, and then you have to come to work and put on this front. But like you said, if it becomes a little bit more transparent or communicative, it helps. Um, okay. My final question is I'm running a half marathon in April. What is your best piece of advice for me?
Well, first of all, you should be wearing New Balance. Head to toe,
Of course.
particularly in New York. It's a New York Road Runners event. We're a sponsor of that race and all that. Uh, but you're not going to get hurt during the race. You're going to get hurt during the training. So
Mm,
make sure that you're pacing yourself. You don't want to overtrain. If that's your goal to run that race, and you got a plan for that. And so some people sometimes come out too quick, and they could get stress injuries, or they could just not be ready on that day. Now, that doesn't mean you got to set a personal best that day, but that's my encouragement, is to first of all try to find a plan so
yeah.
there's consistency to it, and just make sure you don't overtrain within it as well.
Yeah, I find that consistency is probably, the most important part. I started training earlier this month or beginning of January, and then I was like, "Oh my god, I used to be so much faster. I need to improve my
Yeah.
pace." And then
Yeah.
of course I hurt my knee, and so then I couldn't run for 2 weeks. And I was like, "Well, that was pointless. I should have just been really slow and stayed like that for a
Yeah.
while instead
Yeah.
of quitting
Exactly.
my
That's
the
right.
runs."
That's it.
Cool. Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Pleasure. Thank you.